It's been such a huge week in football this week with the FIFA Congress being held in Thailand. We've had so many announcements, including and especially for women. The host of the 2027 FIFA World Cup for women will be Brazil. Australia's been confirmed as the AFC Asian Cup for women here in 2026. We've also seen the announcement of a Club World Cup for women, which just means competition for 50% of the world's population continues to grow. But we've also had some other news, and I guess this is the more challenging news that we've had in the past week. First of all, Palestine's call for a vote on Israel to be suspended from FIFA has been delayed until an extraordinary council meeting for FIFA, which will be held in July this year. We also saw in Australia 3 A-League players arrested for match manipulation. And there's been an update in the Sam Kerr case, the Matilda's captain who was charged earlier this year with intentional racial harassment of a police officer. Now, Sam and her lawyers had planned on going to court this week in London to have that case dismissed. But instead, that challenge has now been called off. So the full criminal trial will go ahead in early 2025. There'll be a full update on all of this in the Sports Ambassador podcast coming shortly. But before that, I thought, given it was such a sensational day on Maroubra Beach earlier this week, when I was sitting with a very special guest waiting for the announcement of the 2027 hosts of the Women's World Cup, I was talking to the woman, a former Matilda no less, who is going to be in charge of delivering what will be the second biggest football tournament this country has ever hosted after last year's FIFA World Cup. Well, Sarah Walsh, have you got a new title now that you're in charge of the Asian Cup, the second time the women are hosting the AFC Asian Cup?
I do. It's a long title. It's head of the AFC Women's Asian Cup office. New title. We won the hosting rights on Wednesday, which is fantastic. It was the milestone that we were waiting for, and now we can start planning with the AFC.
So new title and new responsibilities.
Yeah, I think new responsibilities. I mean, running a tournament. We were just talking about it earlier, running the tournament that I played in 2006.
Does it seem like that long ago?
I mean, I was 23. I feel like a completely different person. I did speak to my old coach who said, I would have laughed if you had told me you were going to run the tournament, 20 years later. And I think, the important thing about that is that it's going to be so much bigger. So I feel confident that we can do it because of what we did last year.
And I think this is the important thing. Lots of people talk about, legacy from the FIFA World Cup and how that is going to keep mushrooming, if you like. But the legacy started way back. It started back in the 70s, and every step has kind of just kept building. So your experience back in 2006, what was that like? What was it like to be in the Asian Cup?
Oh, I called some of my teammates when we won the rights on Wednesday night that were there, and I forgot who was there. It was so long ago, but I do recall moments where we qualified through Asia for the first time. I mean, we'd been going through Oceania for a long time, and we'd made the major tournaments, but I think not a lot of people gave us hope to move through Asia. You had some top-ranked nations in the world, Japan, China, and yes, we had the home ground advantage, but I don't know, I just felt like we felt really good about ourselves. And then that transcended through to 2007 when we qualified through the 2006 Asian Cup. And so we just felt like we belonged there a little bit more, and we built confidence, and that only grew when we got out of the group, won our first match at a major tournament. So I feel like it was a really pivotal moment when you look at the 40-year history of the Matildas. That's my experience, but I do know moving into Asia has had a lot to do with the success that we're seeing today of this team, really testing themselves against the best.
And I think what's interesting, we know the powerhouses in Asia traditionally, it's been Japan, the Koreas, China has also had its moments. But that is also starting to shift, as we see the rise of the Middle East and football in regions where women have not traditionally played it. And so there's a lot of change taking place. So in some ways where China, Japan and the Koreas may have led Asia for a period, do you see this as a time where Australia can really go to the fore and help change the rest of the Asian region that is still catching up?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of big players in Asia, and I think when you go through the history, I mean, I spent time not long ago with Sun Wen, and if you had played against China during my era, that they were one of the toughest teams to play, and she was one of the best players in the world. And when you speak to players that are older than me, or former players that are older than me, they'll say the same, that they're a powerhouse. And they've kind of lost their way a little bit in terms of the administration, but they're making some really fascinating appointments now, and I think they're on the up. They're always going to be dangerous, but like you said, the Middle East is now spending, not just in the men's game. You're starting to see what's happening with the Saudi women's team, and that's only going to benefit the whole of Asia. I think the role that Australia plays is that we're good at running tournaments. This is not just Australia's tournament, this is Asia's tournament. I truly believe that. I do think that Europe has set the benchmark with Euros. We've set the benchmark now for a FIFA Women's World Cup, but we now get to set the new benchmark for the Asian Cup, and I don't think it's historically had a lot of value placed on it, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think that it's usually been this tournament where we qualify through to the World Cup, and there's discussions now around decoupling that for good reason. But we very much see this as the pinnacle event for women in Asia, and so we want to give it the respect that it deserves and set a new benchmark.
It's interesting you talk about that role that Australia plays in the region, because that's shifting somewhat. We're seeing a different level of engagement with the government. Not stupid enough to think that that's got nothing to do with the geopolitics that's at play, but how influential do you think sport is in breaking down barriers, building bridges? And they sound like cliches, but in fact, these are the things that change the way relationships happen between people, so they're not really cliched. They actually have a genuine impact.
Yeah, well, the platform that sport has, 70% of Australia watched one match last year, semi-final against Matildas, and it's really the only data point I need to use. I think you think about it, last time when we had 70-80% consensus in this country on any matter, that broke down how people felt about each other for a little moment. I think it's what government love about sport, and particular women's sport, particularly Matildas and football, with the global leverage it has. But it is the thing that can affect change. You only have to go to a Matildas match now to see, the inclusive and safe space it's created. And in a lot of ways, I think that's how sport should have been designed 100 years ago. It's a shame that we lost that head start, but we're making up for it now. And it's a social impact. I mean, what's the social impact of a young boy now looking up to a Matilda? How's that going to impact a young girl's experience at a community club? These are the things that we think about when we run a tournament, not just the amazing experience people are going to have in the stadium. So yeah, that's how I think about it. I mean, the sport is it's a fabric of Australia, and I think it should be inclusive to everyone, and I think football really embodies that through its diversity, and now with women and girls, I think we lead in this space, and I don't think that's debatable at this point. It's kind of what we do with that platform.
And I noticed this week also they had the first rugby league women's state of origin. First time it's going to be 3 games in the series, and I was looking at the young boys there. The young boys wearing their Blues jerseys or the Maroons jerseys, getting autographs from the girls, and I couldn't help thinking, that is a trickle down effect that the Matildas started. Cricket might argue they started it because their women's team's been pretty good. Also, we've got to give them some recognition. But the Matildas do occupy this unique place, and I guess because it is the world game far more than any other. But to see that now having an impact across other sports and shifting those ideas in society, that is quite phenomenal. And were you always conscious of that as being part of the Legacy 23 program?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Matildas are at the heart of that Legacy 23 program. I mean, you could count on the number of times, on your hand, the number of times we talked about, winning being the complete end game of what we're trying to do. We didn't talk like that. I mean, the measures and KPIs you put into an event, or how the business and high performance team operate, really influence the outputs, and so and also behaviours. To be honest, if all we did was talk about winning, you might have ended up with a team that no one felt like they could connect to. We didn't talk about that. We talked about creating moments like people remember where they were, like they did with the Kathy Freeman race. They'll remember where they were in a course stadium when Sam Kerr scores. Now, it wasn't the opening match, but people have all these different moments that I have people stopping me when they know what I do. First thing they want to tell me is how they felt last year, how someone made them feel, or the connection they had with their son, or the fact that they can now go to games and they bought jerseys for the family. And so that's actually how we talked about this. Now, I think the bigger this team gets, the greater the challenge is to make sure that we maintain that DNA of the team. And I think we've already started to shift what sport and what measures of success are. You go to a Matildas game, you would not know if they've lost or won at the end. People don't simply go to see a team win. That's already shaping what sport is used for. There's talk about alcohol consumption down, and most other major tournaments, there's always a discussion around violence against women and children spiking. There was none of that with this, and we are redesigning it, and the fans are redesigning it themselves. So I hope that we're going to have this trickle effect throughout the sporting ecosystem.
That's one of the things I thought watching these small boys this week, and also during the FIFA World Cup, is that when they're men, they're going to think differently about their relationships with women, because they already do. They don't see it in the same way that generations past might have. But I'm also conscious of the Qatar Men's World Cup in 22 and no alcohol in the stadiums, and the fact that the atmosphere was completely different. And for the first Men's World Cup ever since they've been recording such things, there was no Englishman arrested for violence in the street or getting involved in brawls or activity like that. So it says a lot, doesn't it? And that is the most difficult thing, I think, in expecting women's sport to rise to where men's sport is, but doing it differently, because it doesn't have to be done the way the men's game has been.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the turning point for us was when we reached equal pay in 2019. I really do think it was this simple. We actually stopped looking at the Matildas through the lens of the Socceroos and went, okay, well, maybe they have different needs. They absolutely do. We needed to figure out how we were going to intentionally include a mother, and by doing so, we worked with Katrina Gorry, whose standard of football went from here to here, because she found different purpose and meaning. She'd always wanted to be a mother, and that's what we're trying to embrace, that difference. And I think the beauty of all that is that the learnings from there are coming back into the Socceroos now. Our parental policy is for parents, the men and the women in our national teams, and so we have created a beautiful unit, through all the levers we could, through the CBA. I mean, they both share in the benefits of upside revenue that they generate, and so they're interconnected in so many ways, and it's created a really nice culture. It's how do we do that in all parts of our game? I guess that's our challenge, and that's how we want to use these tournaments to make sure that young girl turning up to a community club is getting that same experience. But the fact that we're been able to shift the popularity of the Matildas for young boys, I just can't wait to measure that over the next couple of years to see how that's changing the environment for those girls.
I can't wait to see FIFA delivering on its promise that at the next World Cup it would be equal prize money, because that means if the Matildas continue to keep going on the trajectory that they're going on, they'll be paying more money to the Socceroos than the Socceroos pay to the Matildas.
Well, who would have thought? I mean, and only football could deliver something like that. But I think it changes the whole paradigm, right? But I think they're as a standalone commercially doing quite well. So
does it come with extra pressure though? Like, does it change the way people have to behave, what they think about when they walk out their front door each day? Because now they are the Matildas that are held up there like that, with all other teams looking up to them as well?
Yeah, I think it's probably a question for the players. I don't.
Come on.
No, it is. I'm not a player.
Matilda alumni.
No, but as an executive working with the Matildas, I think the pressure is to, You know, there was a lot of conversation after the World Cup that anyone that still didn't believe that what we'd done was through, you know, deliberate strategy, investment, you know, through treating with the respect, having equal pay and setting that kind of standard so we can be, you know, in business with them, you know, like hand in hand. I just think without doing that or setting a roadmap, it's actually quite difficult. So we'd laid that groundwork. I can tell you, we wouldn't be talking about the World Cup right now if the team hadn't got out of the group and we hadn't set them up for success on the pitch. And so for us, it's about, a lot of people said that it was, you know, not everyone can host a mega event. Matildas are now the exception. Well, I don't believe that. We've gone on 14 consecutive sellouts now. We're doing something right, and it's pretty simple in my view. It's strategy, investment, and actually getting the women and, you know, who you're trying to speak to in the room to design it. It's really important.
For those who aren't watching, only listening, I'm just going to let them know we're sitting on the grass at Maroubra Beach. Your knees are probably not what they used to be. My back is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll wrap up shortly. But it's an interesting conversation. So just a couple more things. One of them, a lot of men's sport has been driven by the money that has come in through television and broadcast deals. Do you think there'll be growth in that area and significant growth because of what we saw at the FIFA World Cup for women?
I do. I think people no longer see it as an emerging kind of product. I mean, they might do in terms if you were to do the numbers and see who's actually investing and where they are, but I think the myth's been broken around whether or not it's commercially viable. It absolutely is, but I don't think a lot of people know exactly what kind of road we went on to actually get there. It was investment, it was a strategy, hard decisions, you know, and strong leadership, because not everyone's on board with doing things differently. We've shown that it can work now. I hope that's enough for, you know, for other codes. We're starting to see other codes. I watched that State of Origin last night, and if you invest in your product right and be open to doing things differently and innovating in the women's game, it will deliver the benefits. But again, not just the commercial ones, the social ones that, in my view, the best thing that we did was by investing in the Matildas, our game grew as a result. Our industry has grown, and our Socceroos have benefited. Men's football has benefited from what we've done. It's not all about the women's game.
No, it's about the game. And that's the beauty of it all. So, final question. You mentioned before about the significance of the Asian Cup. Does this mean now that you know, you've got an entry card into all of the Asian countries who are members of AFC, and you're going to come calling and you're going to say, how can you play a role in this, because it's about all of us?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you Australia's latest ambassador? Move over Penny Wong.
No, we definitely want we want Penny Wong involved in our event, but yeah, we definitely want to make this Asia's tournament. I do think that a tournament that's delivered by Australia, just by Australia, is not what we're after. We definitely want to make sure that this is Asia's time to shine. It is. It's our moment to set our mark on the global stage, I think, and we can't do that alone. Australia is one of 40 plus members of Asia, and it's going to take all of us to get it there.
Okay, just to let everybody know, in the Asian region, Sarah's coming knocking. Sarah Walsh, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Tracy.